Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Datto RMM webinar on the topic of efficient monitor management. My name is Kathy Montgomery, and I'll be leading today's session. With me also is my colleague, Carl Smith, who will be moderating the chat and Q&A. We offer live RMM continuing education webinars on the second Thursday of every month with sessions at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Time. But if you're unable to join us live, you can always access a recording in the Datto Academy, which you can get to from the partner portal as shown here. In the Academy, you can take certification e-learnings as well as sign up for any future webinars that we offer. If you have any questions or issues on using the Academy, you can email academy@datto.com. So now let's get into today's topic. Monitor management is an ongoing process, and sometimes you may run into challenges. We do our best with Datto RMM to make your initial monitoring setup as smooth as possible with a number of basic policies provided in the COM store. But many of you have very specific monitoring needs that sometimes require additional customized policies. But even once you have your policies in place, monitoring management doesn't necessarily stop. In fact, sometimes you may find that you have to manage certain monitors that are contributing to alert-related noise. So you're faced with the challenge of how to keep things clean, or at least as clean as they can be, without missing out on anything important. So our goal today is to try to make your monitoring management more efficient by introducing a couple of techniques related to the administration of monitoring policies. Let's talk about the first problem that often comes up with regards to monitoring management, and that is large-scale policy edits. You'll find that many policies in the COM store can be quite extensive with a comprehensive list of monitors. While this is good for capturing as many potential issues as possible, it can sometimes lead to a cumbersome editing process in the interface requiring multiple clicks, especially if you need to make an identical change to multiple monitors in a policy. For example, what if tickets are turned off by default and you want to turn them on across the board? Or what if you need to create a policy with multiple instances of the same monitor type? A common example of this is a ping policy to monitor your customers' firewalls. Or maybe you need to build a custom SNMP policy for specific voice over IP or other networking devices. A potential solution to this is to actually edit your monitoring policies outside of Datto RMM using policy export and import. So let me show you how to do that right now. So as you can see here, I am in Datto RMM. And I'm going to start by addressing a common question we get from especially new partners, which is how do I monitor my customers' firewalls or gateways? And the answer to that is usually a ping monitor policy where you use one of your own servers to ping the firewall's public IPs from the outside. So I'm in my account policies here, and I'm going to open a policy that I've started to set up. This one right here, customer firewall monitoring example. So I'll click on that to open it. And as you can see, I've started with a single ping monitor here. So let me click on the pencil on the right-hand side to take a look. So in configuring a ping monitor for this purpose, of course, here I would normally enter the public IP of that customer's firewall, but for now, I just have localhost as a placeholder. We'll come back to that in a moment, but the rest of the options for this ping monitor will be configured according to preference. So this ping monitor would take care of one customer, but you would need one of these monitors for every customer's firewall. And even if you have as few as 10 customers, having to recreate this exact same monitor 10 times could be a bit time consuming. So let's find a way that's a little bit easier. So we'll assume first that the settings for the ping monitor for this first customer are the settings that should be applied to all customers. Now down here in the bottom right, you see this button labeled Export Policy. Now I'd like a show of hands here. Raise your hand if you've noticed this button, but you don't know what it's for quite yet. All right, looks like just shy of maybe a third of you. Now, by the way, if you're creating a brand new policy and you haven't saved it yet, this button wouldn't show up until you save the policy and go back in. So if you created a new policy and didn't return to it, you might not see it. Also, this button only appears for monitoring policies. It doesn't show up for any of the other monitor types. So you will see this for a pre-existing monitor policy. So let me click on it. And this has downloaded a file. A file with extension PCY, short for policy. Now, why is it important that I can export a policy? As I alluded to on my previous slide, there's also an import. So I could use this perhaps as a backup method, or to even send a custom policy to another colleague at another MSP who also uses Datto RMM. But let's examine this file a little more closely. So I'm going to edit this with a text editor, namely Notepad++. And there's the file. So a question for you to respond to in the chat window. Based on what you see here, who recognizes this format? If you know what format this is, go ahead and type it in the chat now. Okay, some answers are coming in. I'll give a couple more seconds. All right, we actually have not yet gotten the correct answer. So I'll tell you what format this is. This is a JSON file, short for JavaScript Object Notation. Now, that fact is really neither here nor there. The point is that first, obviously, it's a text file, and it is in a standard language. And as such, I can use some tools within Notepad++ to make this a little bit easier to read. So first thing I'll do is I'll go up to my language menu and explicitly tell Notepad++ that this is a JSON file. This just tokenizes and colorizes the text based on the language to make it a little bit easier to look at, but still it's all smushed together in one line. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into my plugins menu and use a plugin that I have called JSON Viewer. Now, if you don't have this in your menu, if you have Notepad++, it's easy enough to get by going to Plugins Admin and searching under Available for JSON Viewer. Now, of course, I already have it, so mine appears under the installed, but easy enough to install from here. So once you've done that, you can select it from the menu, as I'll do here. And I'll say Format JSON. So this organizes the text a little bit better into multiple lines, so it can be worked with. So this file represents that entire monitoring policy. Let's break it down quickly. So near the top here, we have the policy name, which is fairly self-explanatory. We have the policy targets. Now, you may have noticed I hadn't defined any targets yet, so That's why there's nothing really in this area. As for policy monitors, this would contain a list of all the monitors inside the policy, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But being a text file, it can be edited. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the name of this policy, because I'm going to re-import it into Data RMM, and I want to be able to distinguish it easily from the original policy. So I'll just add a tag to the end of the name, call this expanded. Now, I won't be discussing all of the parameters in this file because not all of them are supported for editing. But suffice it to know for now that everything between curly braces here is an individual monitor. So this is the single ping monitor that you saw in the web portal. Now remember, for the purpose of building out an extensive ping monitor policy, we're going to need several of these monitors. So in keeping with JSON syntax, what I'll do is I'll add a comma to the end of the closing curly brace for this object here. I'm going to add a new line after that, and then I'm going to take this whole block, copy it, and then I'll just insert 3 more instances. Now I'm done with my copy and paste. I don't want that last comma, so I'm just going to remove it from the last object here. So now I have several instances of the same ping monitor. So if you happen to have a list of all your customer firewall public IPs, it's easy enough to just go through this file and remember I had that placeholder localhost as my placeholder for the IP. So I'm just going to replace that here with a few arbitrary IPs here. Okay, so now I can save this file. Notepad++ wants to put a JSON extension at the end of it, but I don't want that. I want to keep my PCY extension. That's what Data RMM expects. I'm going to modify the file name here to be in keeping with my policy name. And so now I'll go back to Data RMM, back to the account policies. And at the bottom of the policy list, we have this button, Import Policy. You'll see this at the bottom of any list of policies, whether you're working at the account level or at the site level. So I will click on that. I will select the file that I just edited, and then Import Policy. And what we should see is a fleshed out ping monitor policy, a total of 4 monitors, 1 for each IP address. Now you can see how if you had to create a policy for 20 or 30 or even more ping monitors, doing that via the JSON file is much easier than creating them individually in the interface. Now to round this policy out, we naturally need a target. With most policy types, the target is the device you're actually monitoring, but the ping monitor is a little bit different. So your target is actually inside the monitor itself, as you can see. Your target then is actually the device or devices doing the pinging. So what I've set up here, I'm going to click on Add a Target. What I've set up here is a device group called Ping Monitoring, and that group just contains one server of mine that is going to be the one that actually does the pinging of each of these. So likewise, you could use this technique as well to easily create a list of custom SNMP monitors. For example, if you have a type of network device that we don't have a policy for in the COM store. Now, just to show you an example, I will start with a policy that did come from the COM store. I'll use this network NAS devices Synology policy. I'll click on that to open it. And as you can see, this policy contains a list of individual SNMP monitors. I will export that. I will open it in Notepad++ again, do my formatting to tell it is a JSON file, and to rearrange it a little bit. And so now you can see an example of a policy containing SNMP monitors. And so you could take your OIDs, your object identifiers for that device that you're trying to support, that maybe you obtained from a MIB browser or from other vendor documentation. And here you see where you can just paste those OIDs in for the individual monitors. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have to make any edits to your policy via the web portal, but doing it this way can certainly make particular edits a little bit easier. And sometimes it's just nice to see all of your monitor definitions at once in one place. A few important points to keep in mind. So as I mentioned before, you can only export and import monitoring policies. This does not apply to any other policy types. And also, not all monitor options are available to be edited via the JSON file. So you may see an option in the interface for a given monitor that you won't necessarily see in the text file. And finally, bear in mind that tracking down a missing comma or an extra curly brace is outside of the scope of what our support team can assist with. So please use caution. Use this technique only for modifying or expanding a known working policy. Good news is if you do try to upload a bad policy, say you got the syntax incorrect, you will get an error message in the web portal. All right, so I will pause here to see what questions you have related to exporting and importing monitoring policies. Carl, what do we have in the Q&A?
Yeah, we've got a few questions.
Right.
Are syntax errors caught when importing this newly edited policy into Datto? So I think you just barely answered that one. It does give you an error that the policy didn't get imported, but it won't tell you what exactly was wrong.
Right.
Let's see. We have a question. Is there a place or a way we could get a copy of that? And I think that was in reference to one of the example policies you were editing.
Okay, let me
Maybe,
take
Randy, if I'm understanding that incorrectly, you could let me know. Another question, how did you get to the Notepad++ view, and how do you format the PCY file, I think is essentially the question that Jay was asking. So maybe we could review that one more time real quick, just the
Sure.
JSON plugin and all that.
Yeah. So as far as, so first thing I'll mention, so this option that I chose here, this is not dependent on the plugin. So this part that I did, this first step is built in, but the plugin, so let's assume that you don't have that plugin. You can go down to Plugins, Admin from the Plugins menu. And under the Available tab, you can search for JSON Viewer. And it should show up in this list. Check the box for it and then install. So of course mine is already installed, but same idea, just pick it from the list. And
Excellent.
hopefully that answered that question.
All right, yeah, let us know if that wasn't enough. We can certainly come back to it. Another question, no tips for component files. Those ones are a bit different. Component files are basically just zip files, actually, that contain the actual script, which could be a PowerShell script or a batch script or VB or Python or whatever your favorite language is. And then it's got a couple of, I think it's got an XML file in there as well, just to make sure that Data RMM recognizes it and will accept it when you try to import it. But yeah, that would be something outside of the scope of today's session. Going into more detail on that, I think. But let me know if there are any specific questions on that. Maybe we'll have time to answer those as well. Looks like a tip from Michael. Visual Studio Code is a great JSON editor and can catch errors. So Visual Studio Code is an alternative to using Notepad++. It's a bit more of a dedicated coding option. It is free for download, so yes, very good tip there.
Thank you for that. Yep.
And another question. What about the other parts of the policy, such as ticketing and alerting stuff? Wow, what a good question. That'd be nice to not have to type over and over. Absolutely. In fact, we will be covering that very shortly in a demo. Another question. What was the reply to if we could get copies of these Notepad++ files? Yes, I don't know if there's a way for us to send you a copy of the edited file, but I think this monitor policy that Kathy has been working with was just a blank monitor policy that she added the ping monitor to.
Yeah, so let me briefly, so to construct this yourself would not take much time at all, and then you can export that that starter policy like you saw me do. So if I go to new account policy, I'll just call this test. So it'll be a monitoring policy, and I'll click next. And all I did was add the first monitor. So of course I did this before we started this session, but that first monitor is a ping monitor. And you would configure whatever options you want for that ping monitor. Of course, your IP would go here, but I just put the localhost placeholder to make it easy to find and select in the text file. So I just click next, next. Ticketing is turned on by default here. Yeah. So this is the policy I started with. So just a couple clicks to get your starter policy. Then once you save that, you can export it and you essentially have what I started with and what I showed you on the screen. Hope that helps.
That looks like all of the questions so far.
All right, sounds good. Of course, if you have more questions, keep putting them in the Q&A. We'll be taking another break to review them shortly. All right, so we've seen how to ease some of the burden of editing monitoring policies by making use of the JSON export. The next problem to address is the matter of alert noise. Specifically, this problem occurs most often with event log monitors. Give me a show of hands if you've had some noisy event log alerts that you've had to clean up. Yeah, those hands went up pretty quick, more than half of you now. Yeah, so the reason for that, in part, is because these monitors are not like other monitors that detect conditions that eventually disappear. Once an event has been raised, it doesn't go away. So therefore, auto resolution isn't necessarily available right out of the box. You can configure it, but sometimes there's no clear resolution event. So just because event code 1234 appears doesn't guarantee there's a code 4567 that we can easily identify to indicate that the original issue is resolved. However, adding auto resolution to certain event log monitors might be easier than you thought, by using certain parameters. So let's take a look at an example in Data RMM. So back to my account policies, and I'm going to open the Windows Workstation policy. This is a policy that comes from the COM store. And in it, we have event log monitor looking for code 6008 for unexpected shutdown. Common point of challenge, because different partners choose to treat this code in different ways. So I'll click on the edit pencil here and we'll take a look. So by default, like many event log monitors, it doesn't have an auto resolution rule defined, which makes sense because the event doesn't say why the shutdown occurred, only that it was unexpected. Now, on the extreme end of things, and maybe some of you have done this, you could delete the monitor entirely, but then you risk missing an important issue, especially if something is going on that's causing this particular event to repeat frequently. But if we assume that most of the time this is a transient issue and not a persistent problem, in other words, the laptop battery died or the power went out on a desktop at home, we can add an auto resolution to this to resolve the alert if we don't see it again. So I'm going to check the box here for auto resolution, and that auto resolution will be based on the same event. So I'm going to take the information from the top here, so I'll copy the source and paste it here for the source name, and take that event code and paste it here. And what I'm going to say here is if this event is not raised within a given period of time, then the original alert should resolve. So I'll just put in 48 hours. That may vary. You may choose to extend that or shorten it. But if this alert or this event doesn't appear again within that period of time, clear out the alert. So this can be a simple way to potentially keep these alerts from building up. If this event occurs more frequently, you will still see those events, but you just won't have them remaining in your system if they eventually go away. So this can be applied to any type of event that represents a transient condition and doesn't necessarily have a predefined resolution event. Any questions that you have on auto resolution for event log monitors? Do we have anything in the Q&A, Carl?
Looks like one just came in. More of a comment. Code 55 is the noisiest. Keeps finding / question mark / volume on backups.
Okay.
So yeah, that might be one where instead of configuring auto resolution for it, you can simply exclude those from generating alerts, which is, I don't know if that's something that we are planning to mention anytime here, but
yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah, you can use the event code or event description fields and just prefix an event code or an event description word or phrase with a minus sign. That'll tell it to exclude it. That can really help in making things less noisy. For example, you might use the event description field and do minus sign / question mark / volume, and that would make sure that this will not generate alerts if that string is in the event description.
I'm going to try and type it in correctly.
Yes, I guess. I mean, it's just proof of concept. But
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, if we pretend this was the code, if it was looking for event code 55,
yeah.
And then minus sign the volume string there, say generate an alert if code 55 gets created, but not if it has that volume string in the description.
Yeah. And I'm going to deselect these here You can select multiple event types. You actually don't need the code, you don't need the description, but since we're looking at code 55 specifically, I'm just going to go down the list. I don't think we necessarily need to be more specific than that and then exclude the text like Carl was describing.
All right. Follow up to that. Jeff says he has tried that. Oh, okay. That's still not working. In which case, I wonder if those backslashes might be, I don't know, some kind of escape character that maybe I don't know about. In which case, I might recommend just trying the word volume or some other keyword in that description that is not too general, that it would exclude everything. But that continues to not work. It may actually be a support issue.
Yeah, definitely let our support team know if you're still struggling with that, Jeff.
Okay, no other questions? Oh, just kidding. I lied. Is there a way to auto-resolve alerts for patch status alerts? Oh, good question. Maybe we can check real quick.
Yeah, let's do that. And that's a good point to raise. Not all monitors support auto resolution. Since I can't remember either off the top of my head, let's look it up in the help under monitors where they are all described at length. Oops. No, that is what I wanted to do. So I'll search for patch. Usually there is a note right on the monitor to let you know. Here we go. It does not automatically resolve alerts.
There should be only a couple of alerts that are monitor types that are like that.
Right.
Like almost all of our monitors auto-resolve themselves, or can be auto-resolved. All right, question. What is the minus sign partial used for when mousing over the event log description field? I believe that's just an example. If you wanted to exclude events that contained the word partial, for example, that doesn't actually mean anything besides that.
Any other questions?
Looks like that is it for now.
All right. Excellent questions so far. So what we're going to do now is take these two techniques, editing the policy JSON file and using that not raised for auto resolution, and see how they can be applied to a single existing monitoring policy. We'll use the Windows Security Audit policy, which you can find in the COM store. And since it comes with ticketing disabled by default, we're going to quickly enable it by editing the JSON. And then we'll select at least one monitor inside that policy and see whether we can apply auto resolution to it to prevent the alerts from accumulating. So here I have that policy, the Windows Security Audit component policy. Give me a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with this policy? Okay, a handful of you. No pun intended. All right, so hopefully for those of you who are not familiar, we'll resolve that now. So this policy consists of a series of event log monitors that are designed to detect security-related issues on Windows. So for example, if the firewall is turned off or the guest account is enabled, plus a variety of other things. Now, this policy actually doesn't do anything by itself, but rather it has a companion script, also in the COM store, that you would run as part of a job. And it's that script that performs these security checks, generates these respective events, which are then picked up by the policy so they can create alerts. If you're interested in learning more about that policy, it's thoroughly described in the help. You can just search for security audit, and this page explains exactly what this policy and script look for and how you can apply them. Now, I will be coming back to this article in a minute, but back to the policy for now, starting with the issue of tickets. As you can see by scanning down the ticket column here, tickets are turned off for all monitors in the policy. Now, we don't assume that you necessarily want them on until you've tested the policy and maybe selected a few. So that's why they're turned off by default. But for our purposes today, we're going to want ticketing turned on for everything. And we want to do that as efficiently as possible. So I'll export the policy. Again, open that in Notepad++. As you guessed, I'm going to use my JSON formatting options here to pretty this up. And there we go. So now you have an example of a policy containing event log monitors. Now focus for now on the very first monitor in this policy. And remember, our goal is to turn on tickets. So taking a look at this block here, let me know in the chat, what line do you think we need to adjust to turn tickets on for that particular monitor? Give it a few seconds for the answers to come in. Put your response in the chat if you know which one we should be looking at. All right, yeah, and it is somewhat self-explanatory if you look closely. Most of you got it right. This line here, line 32, generate ticket false. So as you might imagine, we want to change that to true. So what I'll do is I'll just copy that. I'll go to my search and replace in Notepad++. And you can see I've done this before. That's why it's pre-populated here. But I want to replace that generate ticket false with generate ticket true. I'll replace all. And now I'll just scan through the file to verify that that did what I expected it to do. All right. Looks good. I will save a copy of this. Oh, and I forgot to do one thing, and that is to edit the name, because again, I don't want this policy to have the same name as the previous one so that I can't tell them apart. So I'm just going to add tickets to the end of this policy name and save as. Get rid of that JSON extension that it wants to add there. Okay, so now we have a modified PCY file. I can now go back to my account policies. And at the bottom here, import. Select that modified file, import, and moment of truth. Okay, looks good. I get check marks across the board. Let me verify just by spot checking that first monitor here. Going next, next, and yes, this is exactly what I want. So much easier than going through the whole list in the interface and going through that dialog to turn tickets on for all of them, or even most of them. So now on to auto resolution. So these monitors are not configured for auto resolution. And again, whether you want to apply auto resolution is up to you. It's not always obvious. But let's see if we have an opportunity here to apply auto resolution to a couple of these monitors. So I'll go back over to that help article, and scrolling down, we find a list of all the event IDs that this script is designed to generate and what issue they indicate. At the top here, these top three actually indicate issues with the operating system itself. So these three are looking for old Windows versions because the script may not run if it's too old, or just to let you know, this operating system is no longer supported. It needs to be upgraded. Now, if you are in the process of upgrading any older operating systems that are still in your managed estate, it would be nice if any of these alerts would just clear out after you've done that upgrade. So let's configure that for this one just as an example. This is 59103, OS not supported. It applies to versions of Windows 7 and Windows 8. So going back to the policy in the web portal, we'll find that monitor. So here it is, 59103. We'll edit it. And let's set up auto resolution. So this is going to be based on the original event. So I will copy the source name down to the bottom as well as the code. And we want to clear this issue out, clear this alert out if this event is not raised within a certain period of time. What should that period of time be? So remember that this policy is driven by a script running inside a scheduled job. It's that script that is generating the events that this monitor is looking for. So let's take a look at that scheduled job, which I already have set up. I'm going to take this opportunity to do this in the new UI. You could, of course, do this in the current UI as well. But over on the left-hand side under Manage, I have access to my scheduled jobs. So I will click on that. And here I have a list of all of my scheduled jobs. I want to look specifically for the one that is running the security audit component. So in the components column here, I will click on the filter to search for security audit. And here's my scheduled job. And I can see in the scheduled column here that this job is running daily at 4 a.m. What does that mean for our auto resolution? Since I know that script is running every day, I can set this to 24 hours. So when that script runs on a Windows 7 device, as you will expect, it will generate that event to raise an alert. But once that device has been upgraded, next time that security audit script runs, it's not going to raise that event again, and therefore these settings give that alert an opportunity to resolve itself. Now, if you have this set up, or if you intend to set up this script and this policy, you may not choose to run it every day, in which case, if you want auto resolution here, you can just set the time in accordance to how frequently that script is running. And likewise, you could do similar for these first two as well, since they are also looking at old versions of Windows. So let's summarize what we reviewed today. So first, we saw how editing the monitoring policies can be made a little bit easier by exporting the policy to JSON format, editing it, and then re-importing it. Next, we saw how auto resolution can be applied to event log monitors, even when there's no separate resolution event code that you can use. You can use that not raised criterion to auto resolve potentially. And finally, we applied both of those techniques to an existing monitoring policy, the Windows Security Audit Component Policy. All right, what other questions do you have on anything that we covered today? What do we got, Carl?
There was a question that came in that I answered via typing, but I will bring it up again, just if it's useful to anybody else. What if I want to update a policy using the export and re-import without creating a new policy? Will it always create a new policy when importing? And the answer is yes, it will. So it is a process of making sure you delete the old policy after you've imported the new one if you don't want to keep both.
Yeah, good point, good question.
We have a couple more coming in. I've created the new policy and I'm at the window to add the monitor, but I'm not able to find it in the list. What am I missing? Let's see, the ping monitor, I think it might be the one that you're referring to if you're going off of our first example that we were looking at. Should just be in the list of monitors, unless you're talking about the security audit one. Oh, the security one, yes, he did specify.
Okay, let me go back to that.
You do need to make sure you have, I guess maybe we should review how to set that one up. For the security one, you want to grab the one from the COM store. It's a pre-made policy.
So I'm going to the COM store here and then policies. And we can search for that in the list, security audit, and add to account policies.
Yes. So that will give you the list of event log monitors. And you can just save and push that one. Don't technically need to do anything else here yet. But the other half of making this monitor policy actually work is that you then need to go back to the COM store and download a script component.
So go in there now, and we'll search the COM store for security audit.
There it is. Once you've downloaded that script component, you then just use a scheduled job to make sure that that script is running on your machines on a regular basis. And what that script does is the script is actually the one performing all the checks, and if it finds anything bad, the script will then create an event in the event viewer on the machine, the offending machine, and then that will of course trigger your monitor policy that you added from the COM store that has all those event log monitors in it. So yeah, you want to make sure that this security audit script is running on your machines perhaps every day or every week, however often you want to be doing those security checks. So I hope that answered the question. Looks like we have another one here. What about variables for the first script? Maybe Jeff, if you can expand on that. I'm not sure if I remember where that might have come up. Looks like Jeff did clarify on his question, what about variables for the first script when we were using localhost? And you'll find them in the ping monitor. Each client may have different IPs for firewalls. Can that be stored in the customer database and then be called from in the monitor policy? The ping monitor that we looked at in our first example, that was just the native ping monitor in the monitor policies, won't be able to see site variables, which is, I think, what you're referring to. However, there is actually a ping script in the COM store. So it's not our native ping monitor, it's just a script monitor, which is trying to do basically the same thing, just in script form. And I believe that should be able to see site level variables. You'd have to edit the script though, or rather make a copy of it and tell it to look for whatever variable name you've created on the site level for each of your customers. So hypothetically should be possible, or I guess theoretically should be possible, but it would require editing that script from the COM store and not using our built-in ping monitor in the monitor policies.
That is a good call. That our native ping monitor was meant to supersede this script, but that would be an interesting application of this, is to be able to address variables. So yeah, give that a try.
Definitely. Piggybacking on Joshua's question, will all of the previously generated alerts be orphaned if their policy was deleted? Yes. Yes, they would. Or I don't know if that's a big deal, as big a deal as it sounds. It just means that the column that normally shows what policy they came from would just be zeroed out, be blank. Let's see, question from Ira. When the ComStore Digest update email arrives, are the components that are already being used updated automatically, or do we have to re-download the components to get the updated versions, specifically the Office 365 channel and semi-annual channel? When you get the emails, we do not automatically update your components, so it is up to you to go to the ComStore tab and use that check for updates filter on the left. If that ever says anything besides a 0, it means you've got components that are potentially out of date. And I believe our reasoning for that is that some people who download components from the ComStore don't, they may want a specific version of a component application that they've downloaded from the ComStore that they're using to auto-install on new machines, and we don't necessarily want to force you to push out the latest version. Follow-up question from Rick. The component called security audit is supposed to be used on a scheduled job? Yes, correct. You can get the Windows security audit component from the ComStore. Not the ComStore policies section, but rather the ComStore scripts section. And you'll use a scheduled job to run that on your machines on a recurring basis. I think those are all of the questions.
All right, we've got some excellent questions. We're a little bit over time, so I am going to conclude, but what we will do, if there's a question that that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you individually after this session. So I do want to encourage all of you to visit Datto Community online, where you can interact with and learn from other Datto RMM users. You can get to the community from within RMM. Right under the help menu, you'll see a link for community there. Other than that, I want to thank you for joining us today in this webinar. If you have any questions about Datto Partner Learning offerings, email training@datto.com, or if you have any questions about the Datto Academy, you can email academy@datto.com. Thank you again, and have a great day, everyone.